Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. This is not our war. That was the message from Europeans when Donald Trump demanded that Western allies help to unblock the Strait of Hormuz for oil tankers in the Gulf. This as the US-Israeli strikes on Iran continue into their fifth week. Several European countries say they're willing to take part in broader international efforts to improve maritime security, but that's not a formal EU or NATO initiative. We're going to get into the military and geopolitical dimension and also into the economic impact of the war as Europe's interests are very much at stake. Let's introduce our guests. Antonio López Istúriz White is a Spanish MEP from the Conservative European People's Party. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
And I'm also joined by Saskia Brikmont, a Belgian MEP from the group of the Greens. Welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
Saskia, do you think we're now firmly in a new world where might is right and traditional European-style diplomacy just doesn't really work anymore?
Well, if we were in a situation where traditional diplomacy works, we wouldn't be here, indeed. But the thing is that the EU needs to remain united and have a stronger common voice on the international sphere. That has obviously changed under also the Trump era, right? Is obviously not respecting international law and frameworks anymore. And this is also the duty of the EU to remind that we work in a multilateral system, that we have to respect the international law. Is working also hand in hand with Netanyahu. We almost forget it, but Netanyahu still has arrest warrants from the International Penal Court. This shouldn't be forgotten, and I think the EU needs also to condemn those illegal attacks, because otherwise, we've seen it with Venezuela. Now Trump is threatening Cuba. Where will it stop?
Antonio, the EU should condemn illegal attacks?
Well, I heard about threatening Cuba. I think that what we all want is a change of the system, of the political system in Cuba, and democracy to come. The way of doing this, possibly we have different approaches, but we all want a change in Cuba. Said so. Times are changing. We have to adapt. Analyses are already made. True about Trump, he was elected by the majority of the American people. We have to deal with him for 2 more years, like we did with other American presidents. Now we have one that is, negotiating New York, Manhattan style, okay? Well, we have to adapt to this. We have to tell him we are not receiving messages through Twitter or social media. We should sit together, maybe NATO. And then you can ask your European partners, what do you want? And then we will see, what is the European reaction. I think that we have to be very patient, very prudent. Stability, the fight for democracy, the fight for principles and for international law, in that we agree absolutely, is part of our credo, and that's what we have to defend. And, I don't like too much, sometimes these nearly comparisons between Trump and other regimes, like Russia, China, Iran. I think that they were never accomplishing the international law. These are the guys that we should be facing.
Yeah, but when you say that, the Europeans and the Americans should sit down together, the reality is, Saskia, that the Trump administration keeps ignoring Europe, doesn't it? And we've seen it time and time again, most recently with this Iran crisis.
Keep ignoring, but also keeps threatening. And it's obvious that this is part of Trump's internal and international security agenda. He made it clear what his intentions are also towards Europe.
Saying if you don't support us, bad things will happen to NATO, for example.
For example, is also threatening to withdraw from Ukraine and to actually ally with Putin. That's his agenda, to go back to imperialism, big powers. He also said, and he's confirming, that the EU is too weak, and we know that Trump doesn't negotiate with weak people. He has said it very clearly in many speeches, in many statements, and so that's why the EU needs to show that we are also a powerful continent that takes its own face into its hands, and that's why currently, the political answer to Netanyahu, indeed, but also Trump, is not appropriate in my view.
I'm not justifying, I'm just saying, this is the new wild tale of negotiation. Let's adapt to it. All these threats that you have mentioned, true, we cannot deny them. Where are they? Greenland? I'm going to take by force Greenland. Where are we today? No one speaks about Greenland any longer. Why? Because the markets went against, this declaration. Again, it's all threats because he is dealing like negotiations in Manhattan to buy skyscrapers. It's not that I like that. It's just actual facts. He's trying to dominate the negotiating table. We should adapt to that. As Europeans, we have the strength, also moral, economical strength, maybe not from the point of view of defense, but yes, in the other terms, to be talking as equals. And it would be good not to also respond, to whatever he says. Every morning is a new statement, more wild than the other one. I think that, Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission, the Council with Antonio Costa, they are reacting well, patience, boring statements from officials from the Commission, we have to set the table at our tone. That's what we have to do.
But you mentioned Europe speaking, that Europe should speak with one voice. But again, we've seen in this crisis NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte saying, Trump is doing great things for international security. I think a lot of your colleagues here have been pretty embarrassed by this. A lot of people here see that as sucking up to Trump. And again, we don't have a united European position, of course.
That's a real issue because also coming from the NATO chief, sitting on international law shouldn't be part of his approach and actually giving reason to the way Trump is dealing with international relations. So that's where I profoundly disagree with what has been said from his side. And obviously we are not united. But I think one courageous chief of state currently is Spanish. He has a real pragmatic approach towards Trump. And indeed, the fact that Sanchez is still opposing the way Trump is dealing with things, and including the war in Iran, but also previously the genocide in Palestine, shows that there's no retaliation against Spain as announced by Trump. But what I really fear today is also the situation in Ukraine, because these attacks against Iran that spread also to the Middle East, and we're obviously now stuck because of Trump in a regional conflict where other countries might enter, the Saudi Arabians, the Emirates as well. And Putin has already said, well, I'm ready to stop giving information to Iran if you, the US, stop giving information to the Ukrainians. So until where is Trump capable to go? And this is also a security threat, obviously, for the EU. So that's why I think this unity at European level, also working hand in hand with Macron, Sanchez, is really important today.
It's good that you mentioned how Ukraine fits into all this. But Antonio, I just wanted to get your reaction specifically what your colleague said about the Spanish Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez. Is he taking the right approach?
I think it's a perfect example of someone that is destroying European unity with his declarations. Because a European normal style is to come to the European councils and negotiate with your colleagues. And you try also to make way with your conviction, not in a pre-electoral mood like there is in Spain. Sanchez is taking the opportunity, because he's facing big corruption scandals in my country. The leader of the government has his wife, his brother, half of the government now indicted by the judges. Creating distractions through these kind of things is not good policy.
And what is Trump doing?
The good policy.
Epstein?
Okay. So Trump is like Sanchez. Thank you for that. Yes, that's a very good example. Yes, maybe, these are the kind of people that we have today, Sanchez also, who do make press interviews without questioning from the media, you have to know. since 2 years ago, there is not a single question in press conferences by Prime Minister Sanchez. This is a fact. I'm not inventing it.
No, but we're not here to do Spanish politics. Again, the Spanish are very good at it. Every time importing...
I did not bring Spanish politics.
I didn't do Spanish politics. I'm just mentioning at EU level, if there are interesting positions coming from EU leaders, they're coming from
left. Whenever
Sanchez.
you are not agreeing,
no, absolutely
Sanchez
not.
Is their God, because he's the only socialist prime minister in Europe of a big country.
No, but obviously EPP is in the opposition in Spain, so it's normal that you disagree. But
Sanchez,
the thing is that
Sanchez is your leader. I know, I understand very well. He's the only one.
Opposing the links and close links between the Conservatives, the EPP at EU level.
Let's move on from Sanchez, because there's one other aspect which I do want to mention, and the International Energy Agency head has said that the energy crunch from this war could be even worse than the oil shocks of the 1970s. Just a quick word from both of you, because we don't have much time, Saskia, on that. Is Europe ready for this?
Europe has already faced similar situations also back in the 2022 when Putin invaded Ukraine, and we already have solutions, common solutions. We have adapted the EU laws that allow us today to take actions at EU level and at national level, also in terms of pricing of market electricity, gas pricing, and I think for social reasons, to support the vulnerable families, but also the SMEs, it's essential that we take emergency measures. But I also insist on midterm solutions that are not there yet. Investing massively in renewables, in the transition, in isolating our houses and enterprises is key to get rid of this horrible dependency to fossil fuels.
Just very quickly, Antonio.
There are some kinds of agreement here, yes.
Yeah.
The energetical dependence of Europe is no longer sustainable. I mean, there are already warning signs from the Commission that, there could be blackouts during the winter if we continue with this line.
Yeah.
So, I think that we agree that we have to have a new approach also to the energetical question in Europe.
We'll leave it there. Thank you so much to both of you for this debate. Antonio Lopez Isturiz White and Saskia Brikmont. That's all for this edition of Talking Europe. Glad you could join us.